Not too many years ago, a remarkable piece of film was discovered in the Disney studio vault. It's footage of a lunchtime softball game from the early 1930s with Walt and his staff. We're going to present it to you now in its entirety. We're going to take a little time trip here back to the early 1930s. Apparently this is the winter of 1930-31. And this is behind the Hyperion Avenue studio of Walt Disney. The staff is having what apparently was a regular lunchtime softball game, blowing off a little steam, getting away from the drawing boards. Why this was actually shot with sound, with live sound, we don't know. But I'll bet it has something to do with some of the spectators that you'll see in just a little while. When this footage was found, longtime Disney animator and director Bill Justice looked at it and was able to identify a number of people: George Drake, Harry Reeves, David Hand, Dick Lundy, Jack King, Les Clark, and John Cannon. I'll point out as many as I can specifically to you. But you can hear the natural sound there, everyone being cheered on. And lunchtime activities were a standard operating procedure at the Disney studios because you can't sit at your desk the whole time, day after day squinting at that drawing board. This is a man named Carlos Enriquez, and he can run. Now you'll see in the background, as the camera pans over, a sound truck. That vehicle is in fact the sound truck. And in a little while you'll see where they posted the microphone to record this. Everyone's being encouraged. It's a very vocal group there. Nice hit. This is John Cannon, who just got tagged out, I think. Imagine what it must have been like. These were all young men, many of them fairly new to the studio because if you recall Disney history, Walt had his entire staff wiped out by his distributor, Charles Mintz, when he went to New York to try to renew his contract making the Oswald Lucky Rabbit cartoons. Now that fellow who just ran by in the black pants is Roy Williams. Many years later, the big Musketeer, not quite as big here. And as the sides change, we see a young man in a white shirt walking toward the center of the frame. That's Freddie Moore, the great, great Disney animator, who came into his own as the 1930s went on. So many of these people had joined the studio in 1929 and early 1930. Walt, who was catching before, is now standing. He's blocked, but you can see him at the very end of this row of people because he's the one who's smoking. He's got a cigarette in his hand, as he almost always did. And there's a Richfield station across the street there. Now it's Atlantic Richfield Company, or ARCO, here on the West Coast. And this woman in the foreground, the camera keeps moving back and forth, is holding a copy of Bernard McFadden's Physical Culture magazine, which was very popular. Now here's Walt taking a good swing, making a hit and making it to first. How would you like to be the guy who might have struck out your boss, Walt Disney? I don't think that was likely to happen. Now here's Norm Ferguson coming to bat. Norm became one of the mainstays of the studio and the man who really helped define the character of Pluto. Some of these guys are wearing sweaters. Others are in shirt sleeves. The rooting section, you'll notice, are more heavily clothed. Now this part, there's a clapper for purposes of sound, but unfortunately the sound is missing from this section. Right above the bat, that's Roy Williams, the man standing in the background who's smiling broadly, and he's got more hair than he did when we saw him on the Mickey Mouse Club too. Everyone's fooling around, and here comes Roy Disney in a suit, joining in some of the fun. Every time the camera focused on Roy too much, he would walk away. If you replay this footage, you'll see that. He doesn't really want to be on camera. Kind of camera shy. And all these people on the sidelines, I suspect that They were visitors of some stature. Notice how well-dressed these visitors are. The women are very well-dressed, and they're wearing outerwear, so I guess it must have been kind of cool that day. There must have been some reason that this was filmed, and I'll bet these were people visiting the studio, and Walt invited them to watch their afternoon baseball game, and it was photographed either for posterity or maybe to send to these people as a souvenir of their visit. And there's the microphone at the right-hand side of the picture on a tall pedestal, and it did a pretty good job of capturing all the ambient sound there on the baseball field. There's Roy walking away again. No thanks, not on camera, thank you. I don't think this camaraderie was just for show. I think this is the way things were in the early wild and woolly days of the Disney studio. Before things got big, before it became too departmentalized, before they became so ambitious in trying to build up their staff and build up their skills to make a feature-length film. And there's Norm Ferguson mugging for the camera, having a good time. It was a little looser, more flexible in those days, and they could have fun together, even with their boss.